The late summer heat of New Orleans carried a thick, syrupy stillness as Emily James stepped off the U-Haul ramp, brushing sweat from her brow. She shaded her eyes, gazing up at the fading paint of the wrought iron sign that read, Maison de Lune. It used to be a jazz café, long forgotten, swallowed by dust and silence, but now it was hers. Hers and Christian's. A dream brought to life in a city stitched with ghost stories and ancestral blood. Christian Morrow emerged from inside the building, lifting a hand to wave her over. His hair was mussed, shirt clinging to him in the heat, but his eyes were lit with the same wild spark she'd fallen in love with. They had fought for this dream, left their jobs, sold their car, and poured every dollar into reviving this historic café. It was to be a fresh start. A place where love, lattes, and live jazz would collide. Emily jogged over, her boots crunching on the old cobblestone. "How's it look?" He grinned and opened the door. "Haunted." She rolled her eyes, brushing past him into the cool shadows of the building. The air smelled like mildew and ancient wood, with a lingering tinge of burnt incense. Floorboards groaned beneath their feet. The walls were lined with dusty mirrors and cobwebbed sconces that hadn't held candles in decades. "It's perfect," she whispered. The two spent the next several hours unpacking boxes, scrubbing counters, and airing out windows. As sunlight filtered through the dusty blinds, Maison de Lune began to breathe again. By dusk, Christian disappeared into the back to bring up an old shelf they'd bought from an antique market on Royal Street. Emily wandered into the back storage room, pushing aside moth-eaten curtains. That's when she saw it. A dusty trunk. She hesitated. The trunk sat beneath an old velvet tapestry embroidered with strange symbols, none she recognized. Dust swirled as she brushed the lid clean. The lock was rusted but snapped open with little force. Inside were old tarot decks, dried herbs tied with sinew, melted candles, and nestled at the bottom, something that looked like a Ouija board, but not quite. It was a pendulum board. Unlike a typical spirit board, this one had no planchette. Instead, a brass pendulum rested in a velvet pouch. The board itself was etched with circles, letters, sigils, and runes that didn't look like any language she knew. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it. "Babe?" Christian called out from upstairs. "Coming," she answered, but her eyes stayed locked on the board. Something in her chest fluttered. Like a whisper. Like someone was breathing against her ear. That night, they celebrated with champagne and gumbo on the front patio, watching fireflies dance across the street. Emily didn't mention the board. Not yet. By the next morning, the board had taken root in her thoughts. While Christian handled permits and equipment, Emily stayed behind to organize. She unwrapped the pendulum board again, setting it gently on the kitchen table. She turned off her phone, closed the blinds, and lit one of the old candles from the trunk. A strange stillness fell over the room. She held the pendulum above the center of the board. It was heavy, made of black obsidian. She asked aloud, half laughing. "Is there anyone here with me?" The pendulum swung in a slow circle, then stilled. The candle flickered unnaturally. Her chest tightened. She asked again. The pendulum moved, sliding toward the letter Y, then E, then S. Emily froze. She hadn't moved. The room was still. Her heart pounded. "What's your name?" The pendulum began to sway again, spelling out Lussne. The room grew colder. The candle bent toward the board as if drawn by invisible breath. Emily reached for her phone but stopped. Something wanted her to keep going. "Are you a spirit?" "Yes." "Are you human?" The pendulum hesitated, then spelled ONCE. A chill crept over her arms. Christian's footsteps upstairs snapped her from the trance. She quickly hid the board back in the trunk and shut the door. But that night, long after Christian had fallen asleep, Emily stared at the ceiling, hearing a voice whisper her name in a language she didn't understand. Over the next few days, the cafe transformed. Christian was thriving, booking local musicians, planning an opening gala. But Emily, she was changing. She spent hours in the back room with the pendulum board, her eyes sunken, skin paler than usual. Her handwriting became erratic. She started scribbling ancient symbols in her recipe books. She barely ate, and when she did, she craved strange things: black figs, raw cinnamon bark, salt water. Christian noticed. "You okay, babe?" he asked one evening as they watched the rain pour through the shutters. "I feel alive," she whispered. "Like I'm waking up for the first time." He reached for her hand. It was ice cold. On the eve of the soft opening, Emily demanded they hold a masquerade ball instead of a standard launch party. "It's tradition," she insisted. "Here, in the quarter. A celebration of spirits and the dead." Christian chuckled. "You're serious?" She smiled, but her eyes were wrong. Wide. Glassy. Almost hungry. "Yes. We'll serve absinthe cocktails and blood orange tarts. Jazz, candles, masks. A night they'll never forget." Despite his unease, he agreed. She'd never looked more radiant, her skin glowing, her voice silky and commanding. But something inside him itched. Later that night, while Emily slept in a deep, twitching slumber, Christian returned to the storage room. He found the trunk. The pendulum board was lying open, symbols glowing faintly in the moonlight. Her notes were scattered across the floor. Names. Drawings. Ancient invocations. The name Lucine appeared over and over, circled in red ink. He snapped photos and backed out of the room, his throat dry. The next morning, he visited an occult bookstore on Decatur Street, tucked between a voodoo shop and a Haitian cafe. He found a man who matched a name he'd once seen on a documentary about ritual magic, Alexander Baptiste. Baptiste looked like a scholar from another time, tailored coat, silver rings, dreadlocked hair streaked with white, and eyes that looked like they had seen death and invited it in. Christian showed him the photos. Baptiste grew still. "Where did she find that board?" "In the basement of our cafe." "That's no simple witchboard," Baptiste said, voice low. "It's Lucine's seal. A cursed pendulum board used to summon the Queen of Witches. She's older than voodoo. Older than the city. Her name was once erased from grimoire and stone alike because even speaking it brought madness." Christian's stomach turned. "She's contacting my fiancé." Baptiste nodded grimly. "Then your fiancé is no longer alone in her skin." Meanwhile, Emily stood in front of the full-length mirror upstairs, wearing a crimson gown laced with bone-colored thread. Her mask was porcelain white, her lips stained with wine, or maybe something darker. In the candlelight, her reflection smiled back a moment too late. A voice coiled inside her head, both seductive and commanding. "He will try to stop us. He belongs to the world of sleep. But you are waking up, my child." Emily didn't resist. The pendulum board glowed behind her on the altar she had built. Tonight was the ball. And tonight, Lucine would walk again. The night air of New Orleans pulsed with the rhythm of unseen drums. The French Quarter glimmered like a jewel soaked in sin, balconies dripping with vines, laughter echoing from voodoo bars, and a warm wind that carried secrets through the streets. Inside Maison de Lune, the café looked nothing like the dusty, forgotten building it once was. It had transformed into a dream, or perhaps a nightmare draped in velvet. Candles flickered in brass holders. Red and black roses dripped from the ceiling like hanging hearts. Masked guests filled the room, dressed in silk, lace, and shadows. At the center of it all was Emily. She stood beneath a twisted chandelier, draped in crimson silk, her mask carved from white bone, eyes painted in midnight black. She moved like smoke, her smile slow, knowing, almost ancient. Christian barely recognized her. She didn't look like the woman he had proposed to. She looked like something out of a fever dream. "Welcome," she said to each guest in a voice laced with honey and poison. "Tonight, we dance for the forgotten, and awaken what sleeps beneath." Christian forced a smile, watching her move through the crowd like a queen holding court. Every step she took seemed to ripple through the floorboards, the candles bending toward her as if in reverence. At the bar, he poured himself a double bourbon. That's when Alexander Baptiste entered. He wore a sleek black mask adorned with gold sigils and carried a small leather satchel that clinked faintly as he walked. "I came as promised," Baptiste said, voice low. "She's already touched. Lucien is in her." Christian clenched his jaw. "What do we do?" Baptiste scanned the room, his eyes landing on Emily. "We need to sever the link. Before midnight. Before the veil tears fully." "What happens at midnight?" Baptiste turned to him. "Then there's no bringing her back." At 10:45 p.m., the energy in the café shifted. It began with a low hum. Some guests paused, their heads tilting as if they heard a distant bell. A few dismissed it as the band tuning up again. But Christian knew better. The lights dimmed unnaturally. One of the waiters dropped a tray and stood frozen, eyes wide with horror. From beneath the floorboards came a faint scraping sound. Emily stood by the fireplace, her hand resting on the pendulum board, which she had placed in an elaborate altar surrounded by black candles and dried herbs. It pulsed faintly with red light, the pendulum swinging on its own. Guests gathered around, drawn to the strangeness like moths to flame. "Tonight," Emily announced, "we honor a spirit long forgotten. One whose name was torn from books, burned from temples, and drowned in the blood of witches." Christian moved through the crowd, panic rising in his throat. Baptiste followed close behind, muttering protective prayers under his breath. "She is the first," Emily continued, her voice warping ever so slightly. "Deepening, becoming inhuman. The Queen of Witches. She walks through fire, and rides the winds of the damned. Say her name and she answers. Lucien. Lucien." The candles flared. The floor beneath the altar cracked with a loud snap. Suddenly, the back door slammed open. Wind howled through the café, extinguishing half the candles. Glasses shattered. The music stopped. The guests looked around in terror. And then, the pendulum board levitated. It floated in midair, spinning wildly, the pendulum whipping in tight, violent circles. The letters on the board glowed blood red. Someone screamed. The bartender collapsed behind the counter, eyes rolled back, blood trickling from his nose. Christian pushed forward, reaching for Emily. "Emily. Please. Stop." She turned to him slowly. But the face behind the mask was no longer entirely hers. Her eyes were black, her skin pale and waxy, veins dark and visible. Her voice came from somewhere far below. "Christian," she whispered. "She's awake now. She says you should run." Christian froze. Behind him, Baptiste stepped forward, opening his satchel. He pulled out a dagger carved from bone and a vial of blessed oil. "Hold her," Baptiste growled. Emily snarled like an animal, hurling a glass bottle at them. It exploded into fire. The crowd screamed and scattered. Flames licked the edges of the altar as shadows rose from the cracks in the floor, long-limbed figures made of smoke and ash, whispering in a language no human mouth should speak. One of the guests, a woman in a golden dress, was dragged to the floor by something invisible. She screamed as blood sprayed across the tiles. Another man stumbled backward, only for his mask to twist around and suffocate him. Chaos erupted. Christian lunged at Emily, grabbing her by the wrists. "Fight her. You have to fight." She laughed. Not Emily's laugh. Something darker. She's part of me now. Baptiste began chanting loudly, pouring the oil in a circle around the board. The shadows hissed and recoiled. The pendulum snapped and clattered to the floor, twitching like a dying insect. Keep her in the circle, Baptiste shouted. Christian dragged Emily into the ring of oil. Her body thrashed violently. Her mask shattered, revealing a face contorted in agony, half Emily, half something else. Her eyes rolled back, black liquid spilling from her lips. Baptiste knelt and plunged the bone dagger into the center of the pendulum board. There was a sound like a scream buried beneath the earth. The floor cracked fully beneath the altar, revealing a gaping void. Fire and smoke spilled out, along with hundreds of tiny, skeletal hands clawing upward. Baptiste pressed his palm to the board, muttering faster. His nose bled. His eyes rolled back. He screamed as the dagger heated, burning his flesh. But the board cracked. Then shattered. Emily collapsed. The void shrieked and slammed shut with a thunderous boom. Silence fell. The café was in ruins. Blood stained the floor. Half the guests had fled. The rest lay unconscious. Or dead. Christian pulled Emily into his arms. Her breathing was shallow. Her skin was damp with sweat and cold as ice. Emily, he whispered. Can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open. She looked at him for a moment. Then whispered, she's still here. The days that followed the masquerade were a blur of police tape, hushed voices, and questions that had no answers. The authorities attributed the chaos to a gas leak that ignited during the event, but no leak had ever been found. No one could explain the burn marks on the walls shaped like twisted symbols, or why 5 guests were missing with no trace, no bodies, no blood, just vanished. Maison de Lune was sealed off. Emily hadn't spoken since that night. Christian sat by her bedside, holding her pale, clammy hand. Her eyes stared ahead blankly, lips moving as if whispering a prayer, or a curse, only she could hear. Doctors said it was psychological trauma. They didn't see the strange black veins that pulsed under her skin at night. They didn't hear the chanting. But Christian did. Every night since the masquerade, he heard the same voice that had spoken through Emily. Whispering from the walls. From the mirror. Sometimes from inside him. She's still here. Christian knew the ritual hadn't been enough. Something had broken, not sealed. He needed answers. Alexander Baptiste stood barefoot in the center of a salt circle within his candlelit home in the Treme district. The walls were covered in grimoires, bones, and protective charms. Smoke coiled from a bundle of burning herbs. He chanted in a forgotten dialect, his voice ragged from lack of sleep. When Christian entered, the candles flickered violently. Baptiste looked up with bloodshot eyes. She hasn't left, Christian said. Baptiste sighed, pouring a drink of dark rum. No. You broke the board, but the spirit was already tethered. The connection was too deep. She's anchored now, to Emily. To the place. Christian clenched his fists. How do we get her out? Baptiste hesitated, then opened an ancient tome. He flipped through brittle pages until he stopped at a sigil, a crown of thorns wrapped in serpents, beneath it a name scratched in blood, Lucien. She was no ordinary witch, he said. Lucien was the matriarch of an ancient coven exiled from Europe centuries ago. They practiced bloodcraft, spirit binding, and communion with the primordial veil. When she was betrayed by her own daughters, they burned her alive, but her soul didn't pass. It fractured into artifacts, relics like the pendulum board. Christian felt his stomach turn. And now she's possessing Emily. Not fully. Not yet. Baptiste narrowed his eyes. But soon. The queen leaves her mark before she takes the soul. Christian's mind flashed back to the night after the masquerade. How Emily had woken screaming, clutching her stomach. How she'd begged him not to look. But he had. And there, across her abdomen, had been a brand. A sigil, exactly like the one in Baptiste's book. Emily sat in the bathtub, knees drawn to her chest, water tinted pink from where she had scratched her skin raw. Her reflection in the mirror above the sink blinked before she did. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. The voice came back from the mirror, smooth and venomous. "You will be." Her fingernails cracked as she dug into her skin again, trying to claw the sigil away. But the more she scratched, the clearer it became, like ink rising to the surface. Her eyes rolled back, and for a moment, her vision tunneled. She was no longer in the apartment. She stood in a circle of fire, surrounded by women in crimson veils. The air smelled of blood and flowers. At the center of the circle stood Lucien. Her face was not human. Beautiful and horrific all at once, lips like knives, eyes hollow yet full of galaxies, her mouth too wide, her limbs unnaturally long beneath a cloak of skin stitched with runes. "You called to me," Lucien said. "You opened the door. Now the price must be paid." Emily tried to scream. But her mouth filled with ash. Christian contacted Baptiste again the next morning. "She's deteriorating fast," he said. "She won't eat. She doesn't sleep. I think she's seeing her." "She is," Baptiste replied solemnly. "Lucien's influence spreads like a plague. If she isn't stopped, she won't just consume Emily. She'll return. Fully. Through her." Christian swallowed hard. "Then we stop her. Tell me what to do." Baptiste was silent for a moment, then said, "There's one option. A coven, descendants of Lucien's bloodline, survived the centuries. They broke from her teachings and went into hiding. They call themselves the Crimson Veil." Christian frowned. "How do you know this?" Baptiste looked away. "Because I was once part of them." That night, Christian and Baptiste drove out past the garden district into the bayou, where mist curled thick and pale over still waters. Hidden among ancient cypress trees was an old plantation house, decayed by time and overgrowth. Inside, the air was thick with incense and shadow. Christian met the Crimson Veil. 5 women cloaked in black sat in silence, their faces painted with red sigils. One among them stepped forward. An older woman named Mother Celine, her voice both gentle and terrifying. "We warned you not to awaken the board," she said. "I didn't," Christian began, but she raised a hand. "The board seeks out the willing." Emily let her in. "Now, only one path remains. We must sever the bond, but it will come at a cost." "What cost?" Christian asked. Mother Celine's eyes glimmered. "Emily will need to walk the veil. A ritual descent. She must willingly confront Lucien in the spirit realm and destroy the part of herself that summoned her. If she fails, her soul is forfeit, and the queen will rise again. And if she succeeds, she returns, but changed. Marked forever." Christian nodded, heart heavy. "We'll do it." Back in their apartment, Emily sat in the corner of the room, trembling. Her voice was a hollow whisper. "She's in my dreams. In my blood. I can't fight her anymore." Christian knelt beside her. "You're not alone. We found a way. But you have to be strong. You'll have to enter her world. And face her." Emily looked up, eyes filled with something ancient. "Not fear, something deeper. I think, part of me doesn't want to stop her," she whispered. Christian pulled her into his arms. "You're stronger than her. We do this together. Okay?" For a moment, her arms wrapped around him gently. But in the mirror behind them, her reflection was smiling. The full moon loomed over the bayou like a pale, silent eye. Wind hissed through the Spanish moss hanging from the gnarled cypress trees, and the swamp breathed with ancient breath, as though it, too, were watching. In the clearing outside the Crimson Veil's sanctuary, an altar had been constructed of obsidian stones and salt. Black candles burned without flicker, their flames cold and blue. Emily stood at the center, barefoot, her crimson gown trailing behind her like a veil of blood. The witches stood around her, their chanting low and rhythmic, each voice layered with power. Christian and Baptiste stood outside the circle, tense, silent, unable to intervene. Emily's eyes were closed, lips trembling as the words of the ritual washed over her. "Are you ready?" Mother Celine asked softly, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 broken oaths. Emily nodded once. "The veil is not kind. You must not follow the voices. You must not look behind you. And above all, if you see a reflection of yourself smiling, run. That is not you." With that, the chanting reached a crescendo. The wind died. Emily opened her eyes, and the world shattered. She fell. Not in body, but in soul. Darkness wrapped around her like cold silk as her senses dissolved. Time broke. Space twisted. Her breath echoed in 1,000 directions, yet she wasn't breathing. She was drifting, weightless in a colorless void. Then, suddenly, she landed. Hard. She stood in a field of ash. The sky above her churned with smoke, thunder cracking silently. Twisted trees bled black sap, and bones littered the ground like autumn leaves. She looked down. She was naked. No, not naked. She wore a gown made of her own skin, stitched with threads soaked in blood. Her hands trembled. Her veins glowed faintly beneath the surface of her arms. The sigil, the mark of Lucien, burned hot across her stomach. From the mist ahead, a figure appeared. Tall. Graceful. Gliding. It was herself. Or, almost. Same eyes. Same lips. Same face. But twisted, just slightly. Her eyes were too large, her teeth too sharp, her smile too wide. She wore a crown of thorns, and her skin shimmered like cracked porcelain. "Welcome," the false Emily said. "To us." Emily stepped back. "You're not me. I am the part of you that called her," the double whispered. "The part that wanted power. That wanted to be seen. You opened the board, remember? You invited her in. And now, she lives through us." Emily clenched her fists. "Where is she?" A smile. "Where she always is, inside." Then the false Emily opened her mouth, and Lucien crawled out. Not walked. Crawled. Her limbs bent wrong. Her body stretched and cracked, unfolding from the empty shell of the doppelganger. She rose to her full height, taller than any human should be. Her face was obscured by a mask made of bone and feathers. Her long fingers trailed sparks as they moved. She didn't speak with words. She spoke inside Emily's head. "You offered yourself, and I accepted." Emily felt her knees weaken, her chest tightening with unnatural fear. This wasn't just a spirit. This was a force. A primordial thing that existed before language, before fear had a name. Emily screamed, and the world split. In the real world, Christian watched in horror as Emily's body convulsed within the circle. Blood trickled from her nose. Her eyes rolled back. The sigil on her stomach glowed like molten iron. Baptiste gripped Christian's arm. "She's in the deepest layer of the veil," he said. "If she doesn't fight soon, she won't come back. Can we pull her out?" Christian shouted. Mother Celine's face was pale. "If we break the circle, her soul will be lost. She must fight from within." In the veil, Lucien raised a hand. With it, she summoned memories, not her own, but Emily's. They played out around them like scenes from a broken dream. Emily's childhood, lonely, bullied, her parents fighting behind thin walls. Her teenage years. Ostracized, unseen, invisible. Her early adulthood, overlooked, undervalued, longing for power, for control. "This is your truth," Lucien whispered. "They never saw you. But I do. I offer you a throne. I offer you power. You don't have to be afraid anymore." A black crown hovered above Emily's head. "Take it. And you'll never suffer again." Emily reached for it, trembling. The veil around her pulsed with a heartbeat. But then she heard it. Christian's voice. Distant. Echoing. "Come back to me." Her hand froze. Lucien's eyes narrowed. "He can't save you." Emily looked into Lucien's face, and saw herself. Not twisted. Not monstrous. But broken. A girl who had longed to be enough. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I don't need your power," Emily whispered. Lucien snarled, lunging forward. Emily raised her hands, and screamed. In the waking world, Emily's body arched violently. Light burst from her chest. The sigil on her skin burned white-hot, then disappeared. The flames around the altar were extinguished all at once, and Emily collapsed, gasping for air. Christian rushed to her, pulling her into his arms. She was trembling, sobbing. But alive. "She's gone," Emily whispered. "I locked her in the dark." Baptiste knelt beside her, eyes wide. "You did more than that," he murmured. "You scarred her. But far, far below the veil. Where no light could reach." Lucien watched. Her mask was shattered. Her body torn. But she was not dead. In the shadows, voices chanted her name. 100 others had touched her artifacts. 1,000 doors had been opened. And now, one soul had defied her. She would not forget. Rain lashed against the windows of the safe house, hammering the tin roof like angry fingers. Thunder rolled in the distance, not as a warning, but as a signal. Something had changed. Something was shifting. Emily sat curled on a cot in the corner, wrapped in blankets, her hair damp with sweat, her eyes haunted. Though she was awake, she hadn't spoken more than a few words since returning from the veil. Her skin was no longer glowing with Lucien's sigil, but bruises now bloomed across her body in strange, swirling patterns. She flinched at every creak in the floor. Christian knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face. "You're safe," he whispered for the 100th time. "You're here. With me." Emily's voice cracked like old paper. "She's not gone. Just waiting." Christian's stomach twisted. From the next room, raised voices echoed. Alexander Baptiste paced behind the curtain of beads, his fingers stained with ash, eyes sleepless. Mother Celine stood with her arms crossed, flanked by the Crimson Veil witches, their cloaks rustling like wings in the wind. "You told me the ritual would sever the bond," Christian snapped, stepping into the room. "You said she'd be gone." Baptiste didn't meet his eyes. "It worked. It pulled her soul back. But it awakened something else. Something older. Lucien isn't just a spirit anymore, she's begun to feed." "Feed on what?" Mother Celine's voice was low. "On fear. On memory. On faith." Another witch, younger, eyes ringed with black coal, stepped forward. 3 women were found dead in the quarter this morning. All marked with the same sigil that once branded Emily. Burned into their flesh. No signs of struggle. No cause of death. "Lucien is spreading," Baptiste said grimly. "She's using fragments of herself. Possessing others now. The board was just the beginning. The gate is open." By midnight, the rain had stopped, but the streets of New Orleans were empty. Something hung in the air, thicker than mist, more suffocating than humidity. The city knew. People locked their doors without knowing why. Dogs whimpered and refused to bark. Street lamps flickered, and whispers filled alleyways where no one stood. In the shadows beneath Maison de Lune, now a condemned ruin, something breathed. Deep in the rot of the floorboards, a new board began to form. Not carved. Not painted. But grown. The wood twisted with veins. The letters formed from teeth. The pendulum, reborn from bone, hung motionless. Until someone picked it up. A girl. No older than 16. Drawn to the building in her sleep. Pale, barefoot, wearing a white nightgown soaked by the street. Her eyes were blank. Her hand trembled as she held the pendulum. A whisper filled the air. "Let's play again." Emily jolted upright in bed, gasping. Christian rushed to her side. "What is it?" She clutched her stomach, eyes wide. "Someone just opened a new one." Baptiste burst in. "Where?" She didn't hesitate. "Maison de Lune." "Mother." Celine's eyes hardened. "Then it has begun." They returned to the café as the first pale light of dawn crept over the quarter. The building stood hunched and broken, windows boarded, the door chained, but Emily stepped through the chain like it didn't exist. The air inside was wrong, heavier, darker, wet. The smell of iron hung thick. On the floor near the broken altar lay the girl. Her body was still. Her eyes open. The sigil carved across her chest. Emily knelt beside her, trembling. "She's not dead." Baptiste checked her pulse, faint, thready. "She's not here, either." Her soul had been taken. On the wall, scrawled in a dark red substance, blood or ink, it didn't matter, were the words. "Blood is the key. Bone is the door." Mother Celine's voice turned to a whisper. "She's building something. Something that requires sacrifice. A vessel." Christian stared at the words. "She's going to return. Not just through possession. But fully. Physically." Baptiste turned pale. A blood-bodied queen. The next days blurred into horror. Across New Orleans, more victims appeared. A boy in the Garden District. A nurse near Jackson Square. A jazz singer found backstage with her vocal cords twisted into runes. Each time, the sigil grew clearer. The pendulum board's design appeared burned into walls, mirrors, skin. Emily could feel them. She'd wake with blood on her hands. Whispers in her ears. Visions of bone altars and a crown of teeth. She tried to fight it. She bathed in salt water. She burned herbs. She recited protection rites, but the queen had been inside her once. Her soul was still bruised. And something new had begun to grow beneath her skin. A small bump. Right where the sigil had been. It pulsed. Beat. Moved. That night, the Crimson Veil prepared a new ritual, one older than even the queen. "We'll need to go deeper," Mother Celine said, her voice cracking. "We must descend below the veil. To the source." Christian frowned. "We already did that." Celine shook her head. "No. What Emily saw was the mirror. But there is a place beneath the mirrors. The womb of echoes. The realm where Lucien was born. If we go there, we can kill the root." "But it's not safe," Baptiste muttered. "Even the ancients feared that place. Souls don't return whole." "I'm not whole," Emily said quietly. "And I won't let her use me to hurt anyone else." Her voice shook. But her eyes didn't. That night, beneath the dying moon, the ritual began. They lay Emily down in a circle of black salt, ash, and crushed bone. The crimson veil chanted in an extinct tongue. Baptiste placed a shard of the original pendulum into her palm. Christian held her other hand, his face carved with pain. "Come back to me," he whispered. "Please." She smiled, just barely. And then, she descended. But this time, there was no fall. No drifting. No soft nothing. Only agony. Fire. Screaming. The womb of echoes was not a place, it was a living thing. A pulsating, endless chamber of flesh and rot. The walls were made of screaming faces. The floor was soft and wet. The air buzzed with insect wings, and the scent of blood was everywhere. Emily stood on a bridge of ribcages, staring into a chasm of eyes. And there, waiting at the center, was Lucien. Her true form. No mask. No body. Just a crown floating over a storm of mouths, a swarm of hands, a voice made of every scream Emily had ever heard. "I made you," Lucien said. "You are my child." Emily lifted the pendulum shard. "No. I'm your executioner." Emily stood alone on the bridge of ribcages, her bare feet slick with blood. Beneath her, the womb of echoes pulsed, alive, angry, and ancient. The air was thick with the stench of rot and birth. Everything here breathed. The walls, the floor, the sky, if it could be called that, groaned like a massive, slumbering beast. Before her, Lucien unraveled. She was no longer a woman, or even a spirit, but a writhing storm of hunger, a living crown suspended above a mass of mouths, each mouth whispering a different name. Some of them were Emily's. Some were not. "You came back," Lucien said with a voice not spoken but inhaled, sinking into Emily's lungs like smoke. "To beg? To serve?" Emily clutched the pendulum shard in her hand, its jagged edge biting into her palm. She bled freely, her blood steaming in the poisonous air. "I came to end you." The mouths all laughed at once. A sound that shattered bones beneath the surface. "You opened me," Lucien hissed. "You craved the power. You called me. And now you pretend to be the hero?" The shard trembled in Emily's hand. The Queen's power was suffocating, her words laced with the truth Emily feared most. She had wanted more. To be more than invisible. To be powerful. Unstoppable. Seen. But not like this. "I made a mistake," Emily said through clenched teeth. "But I won't let you grow through me. I won't be your mother." Lucien's laughter died. "Then you will be my grave." The chamber exploded in light and flame. In the real world, Emily's body convulsed violently on the ritual slab. The witches surrounding her chanted louder, their voices nearly drowned by the howling wind that tore through the sanctuary despite the sealed doors. Black candles shattered. Mirrors cracked. Christian held her hand tightly. "Come back. Don't let her take you." But deep in his chest, he could feel it, something was crawling under her skin. Something growing. In the womb, Lucien struck. Black tendrils burst from the mouths below, snatching at Emily's limbs. One wrapped around her wrist, searing the flesh. Another dug into her side, pulling her toward the abyss. Her legs burned, her mind reeled, but she held the shard tight. And she screamed. Not in fear. But in defiance. "You don't own me." A burst of white light erupted from her chest, flinging the tendrils away. Lucien shrieked, her crown spinning violently. The mouths sobbed and hissed. Emily ran, across the bridge, toward the center of the Queen's form. She dodged bones rising from the floor, arms reaching from the walls. One mouth bit her leg, tearing flesh, but she didn't stop. At the heart of the storm, Lucien's true self floated, a pulsing core of black light, surrounded by floating bones, the crown of teeth. Emily understood then, it wasn't a metaphor. Lucien had crafted her power from the bones of witches she'd consumed. It was the source of her immortality. If she destroyed it, if she shattered that crown, Lucien could be undone. Emily climbed the altar of bones beneath it, her body shaking, blood dripping with each step. Lucien screamed. Kill her. A wave of shadows surged toward her. The dead. The lost. Faces of the girls who had touched the pendulum boards. Their eyes were gone. Their mouths sewn shut. They wept black tears as they grabbed at Emily's legs, arms, hair. She raised the shard high, just as the shadows dragged her down. Outside the veil, Emily's body stopped breathing. The sigil reappeared across her chest, burning black into her flesh. The witches gasped. She's fading. Baptiste shouted. The queen is winning. Christian didn't think, he acted. He took the pendulum shard from the altar and plunged it into his own chest. In the womb, Emily felt a surge of warmth, like a tether being yanked. The shadows paused, confused. Then Christian appeared beside her. His body was spectral, flickering. But his eyes were real. What did you do? She cried. He smiled weakly. You're not doing this alone. Lucien's shriek became a storm. The queen coiled into a tornado of bone and ash, her voice booming in every direction. You would die for her. You would bleed for this weak, broken thing. Christian looked up at the crown. She's not broken. And she's not yours. Together, they reached up. Emily took the shard. Christian held her steady. And with one final cry, she shattered the crown of teeth. In the real world, every candle in the room went out. Silence fell. And then, a blinding burst of light erupted from Emily's body. The sigil turned to ash. The wind died. And Christian collapsed. Emily gasped, eyes flying open. She sat up screaming, hands clutching her chest. The witches rushed to her side, but she shoved them away. Where is he? She cried. Where's Christian? He lay beside her, pale, eyes closed, the shard embedded in his heart. No, she whispered, crawling to him. No, no, no. She pressed her forehead to his, sobbing. I didn't want this. And then his eyes fluttered open. A weak breath escaped his lips. You're here, he rasped. She kissed him, desperate, relieved, soaked in blood. You saved me, she whispered. He shook his head. We saved you. Lucien was gone. The veil had sealed. But something had been left behind. Deep in Emily's chest, where the sigil had once burned, was a faint glow. Not dark. But not light either. An ember. New Orleans had always been a city of masks. But now, those masks were falling away. The streets bled shadows. The air had weight, like the pressure before a thunderstorm, but unrelenting. Time stuttered. Reflections blinked out of sync. Somewhere, a baby cried with a voice too old, too knowing. The curse had reached full bloom. Emily sat in the dark, humming a lullaby her mother used to sing. Her eyes, now fully black, shimmered like polished obsidian. Her skin pulsed with faint glyphs, markings that weren't there yesterday. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't awake. Something inside her was waking up. Or coming through. Christian stood in the doorway of the sanctum's underground chamber. He hadn't slept in 2 days. His lips were cracked. His skin pale and clammy. His hands trembled as he held the small brass ring Alexander had forged, woven with bone, bramble, and teeth. Alexander Baptiste stood beside him, draped in a ceremonial cloak of dried raven feathers, his face unreadable. It's not Emily anymore, he said. What's left is only what Varazda allows you to see. Christian's voice cracked. We're still going to try. Alexander turned to him slowly. Then prepare to lose her, or worse. Bring her fully into this world. The final seance. The circle was drawn in a cellar deep beneath the city, beneath the streetcars and jazz clubs, where centuries-old bricks held secrets no one dared name. 5 witches stood inside the sacred glyph. All were women of bloodlines tracing back to the first fire-burned pyres of the old world. Each wore a veil of bone dust, sigils inked into their forearms. In the center sat the Witchboard, sealed in iron and salt, its pendulum wrapped in cemetery silk. Claudine, the eldest of the coven, a blind seer with eyes like milky glass, approached the board. We do not summon, she warned. We invite. We bind. And then we bleed. She slit her palm, letting her blood drip onto the Witchboard. The wood hissed like flesh on fire. Alexander whispered, the sacrifice must be one of memory. She feeds on remembrance. Love that has roots. Grief that still bleeds. Christian stepped forward. Use mine. Alexander stared. That is not a metaphor. She will eat your memories of her. Your love for her will become her armor. I don't care. If there's any part of Emily still in there, I'll give whatever I have left to reach her. The chanting began. Ancient syllables that scraped the air like rusted blades. The candles, made from grave wax and coffin moss, flickered violently. The pendulum began to twitch. Then it jerked upward, as if yanked by something below. The temperature dropped. The circle blackened. Then a voice, not spoken but breathed into their skulls. My children, have come home. The Witchboard exploded. Wood shards like daggers embedded in Claudine's throat. She gurgled blood and dropped instantly. Panic. Screams. The floor split open, revealing a chasm writhing with bodies, souls cursed. By the board. They climbed with broken limbs, eyeless sockets, and mouths sewn shut with hair. Keep the circle. Alexander bellowed, casting salt and bone ash. One witch caught fire, her screams becoming insectal as her skin peeled off in strips. Christian rushed to Emily. She was floating 3 feet above the ground. Her spine arched backward, her limbs rigid. Her jaw was open far too wide, her teeth cracked and fused into spikes. Her eyes glowed with shifting glyphs. Christian, she purred, her voice layered, his Emily's and something ancient underneath. You came back to me, even after I tore your name from your mother's memories. He froze. She reached forward, and her fingers moved through the air like pulling threads. Christian screamed. Images, his childhood, his proposal, their first kiss, ripped from his mind. He forgot what her laugh sounded like. He forgot the smell of her hair. He forgot his own name. He pressed Alexander's charm to his chest. It burned into his skin. The pain grounded him, his mind snapped back, bleeding and raw. Emily, please. You're still in there. The thing inside her snarled. She is mine. Her love is my throne. Her flesh is my door. Alexander threw him the dagger, an obsidian blade forged in Salem, cooled in witches' tears, and etched with a nun's dying breath. If you love her, you know what must be done. Christian gripped it. His hands shook. One witch was dragged screaming into the pit. The last one turned to run, something latched onto her from the ceiling, yanked her up into the dark. Bones rained down. Only Christian and Alexander remained. Christian stepped toward her. Do you remember this? He held out her engagement ring. For just a moment, a flicker, her eyes cleared. Chris. Then she shrieked. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was elemental. The walls cracked. Every candle died. The chasm began to close. But not before dozens of blackened, skeletal hands clawed at the edge, pulling a thing halfway into the room, a crowned figure, draped in shadow, wearing a veil of bone and ash. The Queen of Witches. Varazda. Come, she whispered. Finish it. Christian lunged. He drove the dagger into Emily's chest. She gasped, not a scream, just a breath. Then fell. The pit slammed shut. The board erupted in blue flame and crumbled to ash. Silence. Christian cradled her. No glyphs. No black eyes. Her skin was soft again. Chris, she whispered. He sobbed. I'm here. I've got you. Alexander collapsed nearby, murmuring the final sigils to seal the space. Only scorched stone remained. 3 days later. The cafe reopened. The air was cleaner. Music returned to the quarter. Emily served coffee. Christian smiled again. They told themselves the curse was broken. But every night, Emily woke screaming. She heard whispering through the walls. She said shadows moved the wrong way. She said mirrors were lying to her. One night, Christian awoke to find her standing naked in the kitchen, whispering into a bowl of black liquid. When he touched her shoulder, she turned too slowly. She smiled too wide. One morning, Christian came downstairs. Emily was in front of the mirror, whispering to her reflection. Except, the reflection wasn't mirroring her. It was watching her. He called her name. She turned. Smiled. Her eyes were black.